Now, one thing that I'm not really into is the concept of ethical non-monogamy, right? These are the tenets of equitable non-monogamy, right? And this is a different concept that many people probably don't know about, but they naturally feel if they're being completely honest with themselves. Because there's an entire mindset shift that comes with the concept of ethical non-monogamy. I believe in equitable non-monogamy. Why do I believe in that? Because I believe that the dominant egos of men and women are flipped, right? Like if we're having a conversation, right, about the difference between the egos of men and women, if we're talking about what represents toxic femininity versus toxic masculinity, and those aren't gendered in nature, right? They aren't gendered in nature, but they gravitate very closely towards the different genders of men and women. If we're having a conversation about toxic masculinity versus toxic femininity, there are different things that they represent, right? Toxic masculinity is typically going to be about having forward-moving toxicity, which is wanting to have control over a situation, and it's about sexual access, right? It's a little bit more direct, it's a little bit more forward-moving, it's a little bit more aggressive, like rape, right? That would be toxic masculinity. Physical abuse, that would be forward-moving toxicity, right? That would be forward-moving aggression. That would be toxic masculinity. But we also have to understand when it comes to toxic femininity, the utilization of weaponizing an assumed perception of innocence and harmlessness. This is what really accumulates to the concept of toxic femininity. So cancel culture in and of itself is toxic femininity in a nutshell, right? The Me Too movement in and of itself is toxic femininity in a nutshell. Is all of the Me Too movement toxic femininity? No. Just like not all of what's considered toxic masculinity is toxic masculinity. But we have to understand the difference between a gynocentric versus an androcentric social construct and structure, right? In a androcentric structure, some things that are considered toxic masculinity that really are toxic, people are going to turn a blind eye to, as in boys will be boys, as in women getting taken advantage of when they're under the influence of alcohol, when they do not desire that outcome. Sometimes that will be turned a blind eye to, right? Under the construct of an androcentric social structure, right? This is what androcentrism does. Androcentrism turns a blind eye to it. When I think about the peak of androcentrism, I think about countries that are Muslim or Islamic in nature. When I think about androcentrism, I think about Judeo-Christian cultures, right? Like if a woman cheats on her husband, she gets stoned to death. But if you ever look deep enough into Judeo-Christian faiths, right? You look into the Judeo-Christian faith of Christianity or Judaism especially. If you really look into the concept and the idea of what it means to commit adultery, adultery can only be committed with a woman who is married to another man. Adultery has nothing to do with a woman who is not married or betrothed, nor a man who is unmarried or a man who's married, right? Adultery in a Judeo-Christian faith is only related to a woman who is already under the authority of another man, right? And if you want to debate me on this, you can debate me on it. This is an open invitation for this particular subject about the concept of premarital sex and fornication, as well as just this concept as well, right? That's an open debate. Now, I haven't done as much research, right, into the concept of what it means to commit adultery, because I'm not a married man, so I don't look that much into it. But I've done plenty of research over the years into the concept of premarital sex not being biblical fornication. This is something that was a moving goalpost over time to simplify things, but also to complicate things over time. But one thing I will say is that in my concept of equitable non-monogamy versus ethical non-monogamy, those are different things. Completely different concepts, right? And I break those concepts down into three categories. There may be more than three, but I'll say 3. And I know typically in my YouTube videos, I say there may be more than 2, but I'll say 2. But this time I'll say that there's 3, but I'll say 3. There may be more than 3, but I'll say 3. And that version that may be different from the concept of those 3 may be an individual who has an integrated mentality, whose ego is separated from the outcomes that they experience when it comes to the partner that they deal with. And that's cool. I'm okay with that, right? But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about integrated individuals. I'm talking about low cup, middle cup, high cup. I'm not talking about overflowing cup individuals, right? So now that I got that out the way, when I'm talking about the concept of equitable non-monogamy, you have to understand that your primary partner is your primary partner, right? So if you've been dealing with someone for a considerable period of time and you have a dom-sub dynamic in place with them, then what we have to understand is that non-monogamous situations, and I'm not just talking about sex, I'm talking about emotions as well, right? It fits into 3 categories. The 3 categories are outsourcing, the mana principle, and cake eating, right? So what is outsourcing? Outsourcing is when from the space of your dominant ego, you gain validation from a source that is on the social level, right? Because humans, and this is something that I took from the Enneagram. The Enneagram has something called the instinctual variants. The instinctual variants are social, sexual, self-preservation, right? So social would be people who are outside of your closely intimate relationships. These are casual relationships. These are acquaintances. These are your fringe friends. These are not people who are extremely close to you. These are your social relationships, right? Then you have your sexual, which are your closely intimate relationships, right? These are relationships that may extend into multiple areas, or they delve extremely deeply into one area where this one area can bleed into other areas. This is your sexual relationships. And most of the time when I'm talking about these topics, this one area is really a matter of a relationship that is your primary partnership. Most of the time when I'm talking about this, it's not always that way, but most of the time that's how it works, right? So that's your sexual relationship. And then you have your self-preservation relationships. And your self-preservation relationship is really just your relationship with yourself, how you feel about yourself, how you go about the process of self-soothing, as well as your relationship with God or source or whatever you call God, and your relationship with yourself, right? Your self-soothing capabilities. And we have to understand the instinctual variance to understand anything that I talk about. Without understanding this, all of this will fall on deaf ears. So what are the 3 different types of non-monogamous situations, right? For people who believe in equitable non-monogamy. The 3 different types of scenarios are mana principle, outsourcing, and cake eating, right? These are the 3 different types of scenarios. Now, what is the mana principle? I've made a video or 2 talking about the mana principle. Now, this is something that maybe a lot of people haven't observed, but I've observed it for myself. Many people, and the mana principle gets broken down into the 3 different categories by itself, right? Understand this, right? 3 different categories by itself. So one version of the mana principle is to be completely single, as in you have no one who you have an attachment to or a connection to at all, right? And don't lie to yourself. If you do have this individual in your life, then utilizing the mana principle is cake eating, or it's setting yourself up to where you will have to lie when you meet this individual again, or you're going to set yourself up to be in a position where you're going to have issues and have drama and create trauma within a relationship when you reconnect with the person who you've had connections with in the past. Understand this. Once you've been in an in or out relationship with an individual for a long enough period of time, right? Your relationship status doesn't matter. This is where I'm different than most people, right? When I have these conversations. I don't care too much about the relationship status or the name of your relationship status. That doesn't matter too much to me. You know what your connection is. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to this person. Don't be gaslighting yourself. Don't be gaslighting someone else, right? So there's 3 different variations of the manna principle. And the manna principle comes from this concept right here. I remember reading the Bible, especially in Exodus. And I remember being in a space in my life where I would observe that women who were attention whores, right, but who claim to be celibate, they tend to start to get older in the face, and they tend to lose their concept of empathy. And from this space, they would tend to be women who you would not want to be around because they were weird, right? And not good weird, but bad weird. Let's say it's women who would post sexually revealing pictures on the internet, on their stories or on their posts. But if a man approached them sexually, they would have an attitude, right? I think you have to know yourself. To me, that's not too different from being a man who posts about how much money you have, but to get mad at a woman being direct with you about being a gold digger or wanting to sell pussy. But you're a man who primarily sells yourself as an individual who has financial resources. That's backwards, right? When you have this type of mentality, you set yourself up to be an individual who attracts people who are looking at you for what it is that it appears that you're offering, but you only want to deal with people who are willing to lie to you about what they're offering, right? That's goofy in my opinion, right? So let's say you're in a situation where you're a man who has money, but you want a woman who wants to pretend that she doesn't want you for your money. Now, if wanting you for your money is how you present yourself, understand most of the women you're going to come across are going to be women who want you for your money, if you have it. That's even if you have it, because a lot of men who present themselves that way don't even have it, right? But if you present yourself as a trick, then you should accept the trickness of how you present yourself, right? It's like a man who presents himself for the things that stroke a woman's ego, which are emotional validation, social validation, financial investment, right? If you present yourself as someone who does these things, and that's the primary thing that you have to offer, then a woman who desires you on a different foundation from this is a flip of a coin, whether or not this woman truly respects you as a man and desires you sexually, or whether or not she sees you for what you present yourself as, what you offer, and then she is trying to use plausible deniability so that she can reap the benefits of what you present yourself as, what you offer. But guess what? It's the same thing with a woman who tries to present herself as sexually attractive, as sexually appealing, and that's what she offers, but she has an issue with men who approach her on a sexual level. That's backwards, right? This is one aspect of it, right? So the manna principle comes from the children of Israel when they left out of Egypt. And then when they received manna from heaven was something that they received daily, right? Except for on the Sabbath. So before the Sabbath, which would be a Friday, which was before the Sabbath was the Friday, and the Sabbath was on Saturday, they would get a double portion of that manna, and then they would have to get enough manna to last them for both that Friday and that Saturday to fill themselves. Now, something that would occur is that if you gained more, or you tried to accrue more than what you needed, what you had would spoil. Very important concept to understand. I've observed men who would be in a position of receiving dominant ego validation, which is being in a position of power and control and sexual access and sexual prowess on a consistent basis, without pouring that energy back out, without creating a cycle of energy where they were pouring emotional validation, social validation, financial investment into a woman. And you would notice with these type of men that within a year or so, a couple years, there would either be allegations of abuse or allegations of homosexuality. I'm not someone who's against homosexuality. If that's who you are, that's who you are. But this is just something that I've noticed, right? And then I've also been around women who claim to be celibate, which is they aren't pouring out any energy sexually, but they're in a position where they are taking as much energy as they can. And the thing about taking this energy is that it's not just about one aspect of it, it's about wanting to have energy on both sides, right? If you're just fucking with me, you're just fucking with me. It's cool, right? If they agree to it, they consent to it, they're attracted enough to you to engage in that type of behavior, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you are dealing with women and desire them to be both emotionally and sexually invested in you, right? Both non-sexually and sexually invested in you, but you have no intentions of ever reciprocating non-sexually, then as you receive an influx of dominant ego validation, you're going to get to a point where eventually you are going to erode your character. Eventually you're going to erode at who you are as a man, who you are as a person, and you're going to lose the capacity to reciprocate the energy that's being poured into you. And this is going to lead to a certain level of narcissism or sociopathy or Machiavellianism. This is going to lead to an exacerbation of your dark triad traits, right? An exacerbation of those traits. And the same thing happens for women. Understand that, because life is about a cycle of energy. Nothing just goes there and stays there in one place incessantly. Nothing just goes there and stays there forever, right? Life is in constant state of flux. So if you are just receiving energy but never pouring energy back out, and you reach the threshold of how much energy that you can take in without reciprocating, eventually it's going to spoil. And once that spoils, you're not going to have the same level of character that you previously had, right? And this is something that I really believe in. It's the mana principle, right? The mana principle. So when we're having this conversation, this is something to understand. So there's 3 variations of the mana principle. There's the mana principle from a space of being someone who's celibate as a woman, or someone who is taking a break from pursuing romantic relationships as a man. When you're taking a break from pursuing relationships as a man so that you can deal with the women on a purely sexual, casual basis, I believe in the concept of every once in a while, when you could tell that you're reaching a space where the influx of validation that you're receiving is getting too high, that you choose a woman, right? You choose a woman and you might run some bath water for her, right? Bubble bath, right? You might cook for her. You might take her out on a date. You might find you a platonic female friend to talk on the phone with. And by doing this, what you're doing is you're making sure that you have an outlet for pouring out, for reciprocating energy, for pouring energy back out so that you do not lose your character. You don't lose your integrity. So that you still have the capacity for empathy and so that you're still pouring energy out. Right? That's one version of the mana principle. Now, if you're just going on a break with someone who you love, someone who you have history with, and you know there's a good chance you're going to be back dealing with them, then this mana principle can sabotage your relationship. Why do I say that? Right? Why do I say that? I say that because of past theory. If someone's giving you a pass for the things you aren't doing, simply because you have a history with them, simply because you've been consistent with them, and because of this, you have to respect the past and say that because I haven't given them all of what they wanted, and I didn't have the capacity to. Sometimes you have to understand that when you take a break from someone who you spent a long time with, that when you take a break from them, you might find yourself in a position where you have more energy to give than you previously did. If you give that energy to someone who isn't as invested in you, and you haven't determined and decided, and you aren't going to stick to the idea and the concept of no longer dealing with this person who you're dealing with, then they're probably going to feel some type of way, right? I'm not saying make all of your life and all your decisions based off of how someone else feels. I'm just saying be real about it, right? Right? So one example I like to give is the concept of, let's say, I'm gonna get into outsourcing soon, but I'm gonna break these down, right? So let's say you're a man, you're dealing with a woman, this is your primary partner. You don't have to say that's what it is, but that's what it is. If you take this woman out twice a month, right? 2 date nights a month, right? Then if she really desires 3 date nights a month, or you don't have the money, you don't have the time, you don't have the attention, you don't have the energy to pour into this woman and pouring this into a woman simply because she's new, simply because she's novel. This is where you start blurring the line between the man of principle and trying to have your cake and eat it too. This is where you're disrespecting the investment that was made in you and the patience that was within this investment, right? Because the past is about patience, right? Sometimes a person's needs are not fully met with you. You can communicate this, right? And when you communicate this, you can't account necessarily for an individual who's lying to you. If they're lying to you, that's on them. You say, are your sexual needs met? Are your emotional needs met? Are your social needs met? Are your financial needs met? What needs do you have when it comes to a relationship? If their needs aren't met, then you should not be using the man of principle with anyone else if you have any desire or you feel like there's a strong possibility you're going to end up back dealing with them, because it's going to create problems, right? I'm just letting you know right now that it will. So the man of principle is split into 3 different parts. One part is if you're completely single, you have no one in your life, and you've been receiving so much validation that you can feel like it's about to spoil, and that you're going to become very entitled, that you're going to start to stray towards the path of narcissism, of Machiavellianism, of psychopathy, of sociopathy, right? To get so heavy into your dark triad traits that you need to find someone who can pour energy back into. And if you're completely single, this could be somebody who you may deal with from time to time. But if you have someone who has been in your life, then this is something that you have to do like on a 1-time basis, 2, no more than 3-time basis. And then you cut that person off and you cut them out of your life. I'm just telling you how it works, right? The second version of the man of principle is what swingers often do, right? One thing we have to understand is the difference between a cuckold and a stag, right? A cuck queen and a stag, or that may be more of a hot wife, but a cuckold and a stag are 2 different things. If someone's primarily submissive and they take value and they take pleasure from being submissive, then being a cuckold or a cuck queen may be very pleasurable to them, because they're not seeking to be the peak of your submissive experience. They want to be the peak of your dominant experience, right? Very important concept to grasp and understand. So how this works is this: if your partner's needs are met and you communicate with them and their needs are met, and the more energy that you have to give from your submissive ego, for a woman, that submissive ego is going to be sexually. For a man, that submissive ego is going to be non-sexually, right? In this particular type of scenario, once your partner's needs are fully met, and then this need is met to the point where they don't even have a capacity to receive more, this is where you may use the man of principle to deal with someone else. But your partner's needs are already met, so you're not taking away from them, right? Like the example I gave about date nights. If your woman's capacity for date nights is that she likes date nights twice a week or twice a month, right? If this standard is met so that you have a date night with another woman that takes place maybe once a month, but the other 2 are still met with the woman who's the primary woman in your life, then you're good. But if you drop down to 1, as in her experience with you is changing because of your experience with another woman, then you're in a fucked up position, right? Because you have to understand, are your partner's needs already met before you engage with another individual? This is such an important concept to understand. Because if not, you may simply have a grass is greener on the other side mentality and not even know how to water your own grass. And you're going to set yourself up for failure, right? So there's 3 different variations of the man of principle. Completely single, as in you don't have anyone you have any attachments to. Then there is making sure your partner's needs are met before you do this, right? And then there is the third, which is the lick back. The lick back is a version of the man of principle. When you get your lick back, it has to be a situation where your partner fucked up so bad that even if their needs aren't completely met, you can deal with somebody else and they can know exactly what you did, and from that place they would still want to interact with you, right? But how would that work? Let's say a man gets another woman pregnant and his wife says, listen, since you got another woman pregnant, I'll stick beside you,
but I gotta fuck somebody else. She gets her lick back, and he's like, I understand. What choice does he have? He can choose to leave if he wants to, but if you know he's fucked up bad enough, he might stick around. So the lick back is a version of the mana principle. This could also be a man who's dealing with a woman. This woman has other partners, and because she isn't appreciating due to her grass is greener on the other side mentality, he may take another woman out on a date and show her a good time and dote over her and give her a really good experience, non-sexually, right? But if his woman is sleeping with other men, or she's getting ensnared by other men, then this is just a lick back, right? Many people say that it's just petty. It is what it is, right? Because oftentimes we have to understand that just like there's the 3 instinctual variants, I look at it like this. When it comes to the balancing of the energy in relationships, I look at it like this, right? Either the person is going to do more for you, they're going to sacrifice for you, which means they're going to give you more control, or they're going to have to endure more hurt that you will share with them, more hurt that you will put them through in order to show that they're willing to balance out the energy. It's one of those 3, right? Anything other than that is you healing yourself so that you can move the fuck on. If you simply heal yourself so that you can move on, right, then the person really doesn't deserve to deal with you unless they're willing to do one of the first 2, which is to give you more control over how they're moving, or to do more to show that they're willing to deal with you. So we're not even going to talk about the 4th one. We're just going to talk about the first 2, right? Which is they're going to give you more control, as in they're going to make sacrifices of their outside situations, or they're going to do more to show you that they're willing to deal with you on your terms, right? But outside of that, that's not how it works, right? So that's the lick back. And that's just understanding and breaking down the mana principle. Now the next aspect of it is outsourcing, right? Now outsourcing is when you gain energy on a social level in your dominant ego, right? And when you gain energy on a social level from your dominant ego, what you're really doing is gaining the energy to meet your needs in a way that your partner isn't fully meeting your needs, so that you can show up better to the relationship first, right? Keep in mind the 3 different versions of the mana principle. If you are dealing with somebody outside of your relationship dynamic, outside of your primary partner, and they're pouring energy into you, before you seek to reciprocate this energy with someone who's a third party, the first thing you should do is take this energy that you're receiving, this validation that you're receiving, and decide that you want to show up better to your primary partnership, right? Because chances are when you meet somebody new, you're just meeting their representative. This isn't a full understanding of who they are and what they're about as a human being. You may be moving to a worse place thinking that the grass is going to be green on the other side. You have to understand that the grass is green when you water it, right? So when you're outsourcing, this would be a man who has casual sex relationships while he has a primary partner, or a woman who is receiving attention and validation and or money from someone else, right? But not sleeping with the man, not doing anything sexual with the man, unless her man's needs are already met. This is what outsourcing is. So if you seek to build a relationship with someone who you're outsourcing with, buying into this grass is greener on the other side mentality, what you're doing is you are attempting to have your cake and eat it too, right? So outsourcing could be, let's say your woman has a sex drive to sleep with you 2 to 3 times a week. Let's say you have a 5-time-a-week sex drive. 5 times a week, right? And with this 5-time-a-week sex drive, you could be an individual who, within this 5-time-a-week sex drive, and let's say your woman likes to have sex twice a week. Now, the caveat is this. In order to do this, she may give you head twice a week, right? So let's say she has sex with you. Let's say your sex drive is 6 times a week, right? And she's willing to have sex with you twice a week. And let's say she gives you head another 2 times a week. Now you have another 2 days. Now,
based off of how much she's willing to bridge the gap, as well as her natural libido and drive towards you, this is where you may outsource based off of this, right? And when you're outsourcing, you make sure her needs are met first. That means even if you don't feel like it, you still make sure that her needs are met sexually. For a woman, this can be about attention. Let's say a woman has a need for attention, and with his need for attention, she may want a man to talk to her a certain amount. But let's say her man is very busy. He's building his business right now. He has his mind focused on his purpose. She may go get attention on social media, right? She may talk to other guys. But if she crosses a certain line sexually, then this is where you start blurring the line into trying to have your cake and eat it too. So you have to know your limits, right? If you're too attracted to someone and you don't know what you're doing, then that may not be someone for you to try to get that attention with. It's quality versus quantity. When you're outsourced, you got to focus on quantity versus quality. Because if you focus too much on quality and you have a grass is greener on the other side mentality, and you can observe that within yourself, then you can find yourself in a scenario where you are giving more to a new person than you're giving to a person who's already in life, right? That's where you blur the line, and then you get into trying to have your cake and eat it too. Right? Very important concept to understand. So a woman who's outsourcing may get attention, but you have to understand getting your hand caught in the cookie jar. And this is where we have to understand the difference. And this is probably my first time talking about the sexual polarity quadrant in this video, right? When you are outsourcing, it's best to do that from a masculine dominant stance, right? And understand that the manner principle is the masculine submissive exercise and self-control. And sharing the thought or the idea that you will reciprocate an individual while having no intentions to is feminine dominant. That's manipulating. And when you're attempting to manipulate, anytime you attempt to manipulate an individual, you're setting yourself up to get manipulated yourself. Because if they do not give you the validation that you desire, you may fixate and ruminate and become obsessed with the desire for them to reciprocate your energy to the extent where that becomes your emotional priority, and then you start switching up on the person who you're already with. Because they may be doing a masculine submissive exercise of self-control. So it's best to outsource from a masculine dominant stance. What does that mean, and what does that look like, right? Now, if you are an individual who is masculine dominant, then you value yourself and have the confidence to know that in the way that you present yourself, you are attractive enough, right? You are attractive enough, and you believe this attractiveness to only deal with people who are feminine submissive towards you, or at the bare minimum, they're doing a masculine submissive exercise in self-control, but you are not getting manipulated by this masculine submissive exercise in self-control. What does that mean, and what does that look like? That means that if you are masculine dominant as a woman, you may have platonic male friends or beta male orbiters, right? But you do not buy into or feed into their sexual innuendo. You do not get caught up in the feeling of, oh, this man isn't trying to sleep with me, so that means I need to try harder to get him to want to sleep with me so I can move on. It works sometimes, but if it doesn't work, you're going to get your hand caught in the cookie jar. And once you get your hand caught in the cookie jar, you're going to sabotage your relationship. So if you're masculine dominant with how you're dealing with outside parties, with third parties, then what you're doing is you're moving from a space of saying, okay, if you're a woman, I'm non-sexually appealing, which means that without sending nudes or sexual type of innuendo, who you are as a person is attractive enough to attract someone to give you non-sexual validation, to help fill your cup so that you can show up better to your relationship. As a man, you're not trying to present the idea of a relationship. You're not trying to present the idea of making a woman feel non-sexual validated so that you can deal with her. You're presenting your sexual value, and if this isn't enough for you, then if this isn't enough for her, then that's not somebody who you should be dealing with. Because once you cross the line of pouring more energy into a third party than into your primary partner, now you're attempting to have your cake and eat it too. Right? So if you are an individual who is outsourcing, then there's certain ways you go about it. It's equitable non-monogamy versus ethical non-monogamy, right? So trying to have your cake and eat it too is when you try to abuse and use the stability and security of your primary partner to give you the safety net to pursue building a relationship with another individual while not subjecting them to the same pitfalls and negative emotions that your partner would have to deal with, but dealing with you on a regular basis. That means if you're a woman and you sexually reject your partner from time to time, that means that this third party has to be sexually rejected more often than your primary partner is, right? But it also means that it's a situation where if they aren't pursuing you sexually at all, you shouldn't be involved in that situation if they're not interested enough in you, because you can easily convince yourself that this person is more masculine or more dominant because they aren't pursuing you in that way, when they may just be doing a masculine submissive exercise of self-control. Same thing with a man. If you're dealing with a woman sexually, understand that in an integrated relationship, how you move non-sexually is going to have somewhat of a role to play in a woman's sexual attraction to you. But when you're dealing with a third party, or you're dealing with a new woman, and sex is the only thing that's on the table, she's not going to look at how you move sexually. She's not going to look at how you move non-sexually to determine her sexual attraction to you. So if you're moving non-sexually in a way that's not attractive, it's not dominant, it's not masculine, then a woman who is only dealing with you sexually may be more sexually available to you than a woman who you're in an integrated relationship with. So what's another version of having hate in the two? It's really about using your primary partner as a safety net. That's what monkey branching is. One part of it's monkey branching, another part of it's trying to have your cake and eat it too. But both of these fit under the umbrella of trying to have your cake and eat it too. Right? So when you're attempting the monkey branch, it's when you're buying into the representative that an individual presents to you. It takes 3 to 6 months to really get to know a person when you're dealing with them consistently. So it may take longer than that. It may take a year. It may take more than that. And when you're not subjecting this outside party to the same things that your partner has to deal with, you may create a false sense of safety, which is feeling intrinsically desirable with your partner, right? For how you show up in that relationship. If you're showing up better for someone else based off of their concept of return on investment than your own partner, then they will feel good about you. And when they feel good about you, they're going to be able to treat you in a way where they have less of a desire to control or to possess or to be in control of how you interact with them or others, because they don't give that much of a fuck about you yet. They're not that invested, right? And this can give you a false sense of safety. And from this false sense of safety, you can falsely conclude that this person is better for you than the person that you're already with, which most of the time is not true, right? So what are the 3 variations of the concept of equitable non-monogamy, right? Are you outsourcing? Are you utilizing the manna principle? Or are you trying to have your cake and eat it too? Understand, if you're trying to have your cake and eat it too, you're wrong. Now, there are ways to monkey branch. But if you're monkey branching, you need to subject this individual to the same things your partner has to deal with on a consistent basis. And if they're able to deal with this and handle you in a way where you like how they're handling you, and they are invested, you've seen enough of their investment to know that they're consistently investing in you, and they treat you better consistently, then this monkey branch is not always a bad monkey branch. But if they don't know what you really have going on, let's say that you have a primary partner and they know what you have going on, and you have a secondary or a tertiary partner, they don't know what you have going on, so they can't judge you based off of what you're doing because they don't know. Then the fact that they don't know can give them a false sense of safety, a false sense of security to pursue you with the false idea that you're really pursuing them or that you're really invested, right? So because their return on investment is so high, they can treat you in a way where it's going to be very easy for them to interact with you without making you feel unsafe, right? So I think it's very important to understand this concept. The concept I'm talking about is ethical non-monogamy versus equitable non-monogamy, right? A very important concept to understand. And the better we understand this, the better. Because you don't want to find yourself in a position where you are treating someone as if they're better because they're new, when in actuality, they wouldn't treat you as well if they dealt with you on the same terms and in the same basis as the person you're already with. If you're receiving energy from outsourcing, you should take that energy and transmute that into treating the primary partner in your life better, right? And you shouldn't be seeking to use the man of principle, as in pouring out from your submissive ego, which would be sexually for a woman, right? And her mindset for a woman, or non-sexually, emotionally, socially, financially for a man, unless this individual has been consistently subjected to the same things that your partner has to deal with. Understand that when you haven't been in a situation for a long period of time, like if you haven't been out in the streets for a long period of time, then you may not recognize this. You may view someone who is treating you a certain way as that's just how they're treating you. You may have done certain things that hit their ego in a way to where they're not invested enough to want to be with you, but they're invested enough to put in the work to try and manipulate you. And if you find yourself in that position, it's very easy to find yourself in a situation where someone who is not that invested in you is willing to do and say all of the right things to make you want to deal with them, even though they have no intentions of making something sustainable with you, right? So this is equitable non-monogamy versus ethical non-monogamy. This is Coach Brody. I'm out.